Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
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 I hope you're all having a wonderful day already. I do have a request. If everyone wouldn't mind putting on their cameras so I can actually see the people I'm talking to, it would make me feel much more comfortable.
I don't think I can do that, but I'll try.
Okay, well, if you can't do it, I will understand. So it's 9:02. I don't want to waste your time. So would you like me to start by introducing myself?
Please.
Okay. My name is Murray Ezring. I was ordained at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America in 1978 after 5 of the hardest years of schooling in my life. In fact, when I entered the seminary, my wife was shocked because she actually would see me studying, which is something I never had to do before I entered the seminary. So it was quite an experience, a learning experience, and an enjoyable experience. And even to this day, as a rabbi, other than working with people as a pastor, there's nothing I enjoy more than having to do research on a halachic question. Which is why each time I have had to make a presentation of some kind here, I showed the different ways that rabbis work, either with only traditional texts or only the Talmud, or texts throughout the ages, whether we're talking about Middle Ages, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the modern era, or the present. There are always great rabbinic texts to use when researching every and any question. I grew up in Rock Island, Illinois, which is why I sometimes have a tendency to dress in jeans. If I ever find another pair of cowboy boots that fit my feet, I will purchase them. I've been looking for, I guess, about 10 years now. And there's a bit of cowboy in me because I grew up on the Mississippi River in farm country. Rock Island is a small town on the Illinois hump, and it's the only place in the world that the Mississippi River runs both north and south and east and west. So now you know a little oddity about where I grew up, and I am willing to take any questions you have that you'd like to ask. Yes, Brian.
So I want to just get some clarity about what you said yesterday about the Zoom and making decisions. So correct me if I'm wrong, as I understand it, someone needs to actually have their video on at the beginning, be counted as part of the minyan on Zoom, and as opposed to the video off.
Correct. So here we are, and that's one of the reasons that Brian, one of us is having trouble. And I don't know whether it's here in the synagogue or where you are.
Okay.
So one of the reasons that I asked everyone to turn on their video is to get people used to.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you kind of break up and slow down. So I think I got your question though. And yeah, so the reason, the texts I quoted yesterday are span the centuries all the way up to the 20th century. And some of those are texts that the Rabbinical Assembly Committee on Jewish Law and Standards used in their tshuva. Others are not. There are many. One of the questions that was dealt with in the discussion as you go through the centuries is if there are people in the sanctuary or chapel doing minyan, and they're short, but you have enough people in the kitchen cooking for the synagogue, can you count the people in the kitchen as part of the minyan? And there the answer is, as long as you can hear them. So in the end, we're supposed to hear and see you to be able to count you in a minyan. Because as we all know from our children and grandchildren, even my, Kobe's in what, first grade or second grade now? Even my second grader knows that if he turns on his picture, he can walk away from the screen. If he puts his picture, his photograph on the screen, he can walk away from the computer for almost as long as he wants, as long as he doesn't think the teacher's going to call on him. And he does. He just walks away because he gets bored. So if you can't see and hear people, you don't know for sure whether they're there.
That's when he was in kindergarten.
So, yes, Brian.
So, but then once the service starts, 8 people can leave. And if 2 people remain, they can say the service is if 10 people were there.
According to
Based on what you
traditional
were saying about
halakha,
people leaving.
you heard me correctly, but you got the number wrong. Okay, so according to the traditional sources, if you have a minyan of 10 and 4 people leave, say just before the Kedusha, you can continue the rest of the service as if you have a minyan, a full minyan. And part of the rationale behind that, we believe, is that there is some thought that the original number for a prayer quorum was 6. So we don't know for sure. Some scholars say, oh, definitely it was 6. And others say, are you nuts? Jerry. You have to unmute, Jerry.
Sorry, Rabbi. Anyway, Rabbi, I remember years ago, I don't know if you've heard this story yet. We used to have kind of like a shamus or whatever. The guy who really conducted, his name was Benjamin Goldberg. He was a rabbi. And to sort of get around things, he counted the Torahs. If, let's say, there were 7 people at the minyan and he had 3 Torahs in the room, he would count them as part of the minyan.
Okay, so there are many rabbis today in the conservative movement, and even within Orthodoxy, who, if they're 1 person short, will count the Torah as the 10th person. But that, in all honesty, is a bubba maisa.
What's that mean?
That means it's an old wives' tale.
Okay. I'm learning something new every day. Bubba Maisa.
Bubba maisa.
Bubba Maisa. I got to remember. I'm writing that down. Bubba Maisa.
Yeah, one of those stories my grandmother used to tell us that wasn't true. But because so many places have difficulty making a minyan, communities make up rules so that they can do things that they need to do, but might not, if you follow the strict interpretation of the law, you might not be able to. So the question is, is Judaism a religion, a lifestyle that only accepts the letter of the law, or are we really a tradition that emphasizes the spirit of the law? And that's where the discrepancies in law come in. Chuck, did you raise your hand?
Yes, Rabbi. I just want to follow up on what Brian was asking about. As I understand it, the guidance from the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards didn't really adopt wholesale the view that remote minions were preferable, but was really based on the crisis situation created by COVID. So my question is, if they issue new guidance and say that the crisis situation is over and we would like to go back to our former standard, would you be comfortable nevertheless continuing to permit remote minions?
Chuck, I hate to tell you this. I was permitting remote minions and people reading Torah from home before the permission for the Sha'at Hadchak, the crisis situation, came through from the RA. In my first little talk here on Monday evening, one of the things I said was Jack Wertheimer believes that the national organizations have failed the conservative movement by not coming to a firm conclusion on what our mission and vision was, so that have been many times when the Rabbinical Assembly, the Cantors Assembly, United Synagogue, Men's Club, etc., disagreed with each other. You could go to a men's club convention and the services would be run one way. You go to a women's league convention and services are run differently. You go to the Rabbinical Assembly convention and you have multiple services to choose from because we can't decide which is the proper way to do services for our movement. So that's actually the beauty and the strength of the conservative movement, is that I believe that if you look at the Jewish world, the conservative movement is the closest representation of the life that the rabbis who created the Talmud were living, those first generations, where you could disagree on major halacha and you may not eat in each other's homes, but you could daven with each other, understanding that just because this is done differently than I do, it's okay. We have to start taking stances. I don't know if any of you have ever read Emet Be'emunah, the booklet that was written back in the, I think, early 80s or late 70s about the principles of conservative Judaism. And it's wonderful. You know, you talk about kashrut. What you can eat dairy out. Oh, no, you can only eat dairy out if it's cold. No, you can only eat salads out. Or you can eat cheese pizza out. Or you can eat eggplant parmesan out. And it's all in there. Their conclusion is that there's no conclusion. And they give such a breadth of what is acceptable that the purpose of the booklet was lost. And that's why it never really took hold within the movement as a guide for us. So I don't know if that helps answer your question or not, but.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Iris?
Hi, Rabbi. Nice to see you again.
It's wonderful to see you again.
My question is, you have been at Minions. I don't know if you have streamed our Shabbat services. Were you planning to change any of the way our services run?
First, let me repeat, as I have at every question and answer session, I am not here to change Beth Israel. I am here to make changes that your leadership may want made and to help the congregation change those things that might help attract the kind of rabbi that you want as your next permanent rabbi. But I'll give you an example. When I went to Maitland, Florida, which is in Orlando, in case you didn't know, I was told you have to shorten our services. So the first thing I did was, I said, oh, look, I give a sermon that's never, and I don't like to say what I give are really sermons. They're more discussions or presentations. I like to get give and take as often as I can. My 12 to 15-minute sermon was half the time of the previous rabbis. So I saved 15 minutes just by stepping onto the pulpit. That was kind of neat. Then they used to read this extremely long list for our Refuah Shalema portion of the service, the healing portion. And the list was a couple of pages long, multiple columns, and it would take 15 minutes to read the list. What was the real problem? There was no one in the congregation who knew 2/3 of the people on that list. And one person noticed that 2 of the people she knew had died 2 years ago. So we were making a Misha Berach for a speedy recovery for people who had died, for people who we didn't know whether they were sick or not. So I like to learn. When I was in Norfolk, they do a wonderful thing. For the healing portion of their service, instead of reading a long list, they have a basket with the names of all the chronically ill in the congregation and in congregational families. And when people come into services on Shabbat morning, everyone takes a name for them to pray for during the healing portion of the service. So we started doing that in Orlando, and it was amazing. It took a month before people started taking the names, but once they started taking them, every name in the basket is taken virtually every week now. And it shortened the service by another 15 minutes, 10 minutes at least. And people were complaining, well, we don't get to hear all the names anymore. I said, well, did it do you any good listening to names that you didn't know, who may or may not still be alive, who may or may not still be sick in some way? So people got used to it, and now they're very pleased with it. But it's even these little changes create tremendous disorientation for certain members of the congregation. And it doesn't matter of age. It has to do with, this is my service, and if we change anything, it's no longer my service. So those are the kinds of changes I made, and we cut an hour out of the service. It went from 3.5 to 2.5 hours, even with a bar mitzvah.
Rabbi,
I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Rabbi,
Yeah, Jim.
I was thinking about something a couple days ago as far as Mishaberas go. We're not only praying for the sick, but for some reason, it's for us too. The people that are praying for that person that is, either terminally or chronically. Somehow, I just want to, I'm just making a comment. I think somehow Mishaberas are for us as well as for the sick person.
I don't disagree with you. It's the same thing. People think we sit Shiva to help this is based on a Talmudic story, to help our deceased relatives get into heaven. That's why we say Kaddish. That's why we sit Shiva. But Shiva is for us. It's for the people who are surviving, to help them reacclimate themselves to life without a person that was very important to them. So in many ways, and that's one of the ways that Jewish spirituality is different from the spiritualities of most peoples amongst whom we live, that every time we perform a mitzvah, no matter how large or small that mitzvah is to each of us, that we are doing for the purpose of fulfilling God's wishes and community wishes, and because it makes us feel closer to God. You
know what, Rabbi, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I was always thinking when someone does pass, I say life will, I think I said this after my grandmother passed away. She passed away about 25 years ago, and she was 97 years old. And, she had a good life and had a very fulfilling good life. But I just can't help thinking I said to my wife one night, I said to Martha, what, life will get back to normal. And I said, we'll get back to normal under new circumstances.
Okay, I like to tell people we're going to get back to a new normal.
Life will get back to normal under new circumstances, but under normal is good too.
Yeah. And I think it's coming much more quickly at this point than anyone had anticipated. And part of that's because of the people who refused to follow CDC guidelines. So, their actions have brought all of us, and I disagree with them. I think that they put us all at risk, but their actions, I think, have rushed us through the end of this pandemic and helping us understand that we have to live with this illness now every day for the rest of our lives. And like the flu, we'll figure out the best ways to do so. Anyone else have a question?
Well, sort of like the unknown now. I think, as they say, the goalpost was always going backwards or forwards or whatever during this whole COVID thing, as new information became available. I remember Dr. Fauci, they criticized for lying, but he was learning as we were.
Right. And that's why if there are any physicians on the line, I don't mean this negatively towards you. I consider physicians artists more than scientists. They take the knowledge that we have and put it to practical use to help us in the best ways they can. And as we get more and more experience, what they can do grows and grows and grows. So it's just amazing. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Rabbi.
I think you were on for something yesterday too. Is that correct?
Yeah, I try to make it on, but I'm technically at work, so don't say anything to anybody.
Gotcha. All right.
But I try to come on and listen when I can.
Wonderful. Good to see you.
You too.
Anyone else have any questions? Is that Brian? Yeah. You need to unmute.
Yeah, I changed my connections so that.
Gotcha.
So if no one's going to ask anything particular, I have a question about Kaddish and a couple of things. I'm just wondering whether there's information about how the prayer service got set up so that Kaddish is at the beginning, the mourner's Kaddish at the beginning of the service, mourner's Kaddish at the end of the service. Was that partly designed? Was part of that designed to allow people to show up at any point? They could show up at the end and say Kaddish. They could show up at the beginning and leave and say Kaddish. And how did it get to be that? And in some synagogues, or even in conservative, we'll say Kaddish and then we'll have the day and then Kaddish again.
Right. So the Kaddish became a very important aspect of Jewish life and the recitation of Kaddish. Personally, I happen to think that we emphasize Kaddish a little bit too much, but there are certain things that have to be done before you can say Kaddish. So there has to be a psalm or something biblical, or the Aleinu, which was really written specifically to allow us to say an additional Kaddish at the end. So, and then we do the Psalm of the Day, which allows you to do a second Kaddish at the end of the service. When exactly the Kaddish became that important was sometime after Rabbi Akiba. He is the one who is credited in the Talmud with creating the whole concept of the necessity of saying the mourner's Kaddish. And our services, the Talmud was one of the most amazing documents in the world history until it was written down. Once it was written down, it stopped evolving. But originally it was published orally by memory experts, the Tanaim, that those first generations of rabbis had Tanaim amongst them. And the Tana was the person in the yeshiva who had to memorize the entire corpus of Jewish law being taught in that yeshiva. And there is a thought that many of the discussions in the Talmud came about through annual or multiple times a year when the yeshivas would get together and the Tanaim would quote the new laws that were enacted since the last convention, and then they'd argue out who was right, which one should we be used. And most of the time, the Talmud is written in such a way as to accept differences in practice. So if in Pumbedita they did it one way, and in Usha they did it another way, or Yavna, it was okay. Yeah, but they wanted to know what was going on in the halachic world. And we've kind of lost that because the Talmud was written, it can't change. And therefore, people who disagree with something in the Talmud, when they're doing an English translation, might not translate that portion of the Talmud. And that way they don't have to deal with something they don't want to explain to their students. It's very interesting. So I can't give you exact dates. We know that some of the portions of the service may well date back to the Babylonian exile when synagogues first cropped up. And when the return to Israel came, they brought some of those parts of the service with them. And many people believe that the Avot, the Imahot, the Gevurot at the beginning of the Amidah stem from that time in the first exile. Definitely from the second exile, but very possibly from 576, 586 BCE. Yes, Iris.
I have another question. Sorry. I know what your role is as the interim rabbi is to prepare our synagogue for a senior rabbi in a year, hopefully. But you will be working with administration and the board. Do you also see yourself talking to congregants and to getting to know the different age groups of our congregation?
The best way I can answer that is to say that the people who were in the congregation I served for 2 years in Norfolk and the people who are in Maitland are shocked at the fact that I take my role as being the rabbi of the congregation very seriously. And I spent 45 minutes before religious school every Wednesday afternoon walking around the hall in which our religious school students were getting their snacks between school and religious school and getting to know them. And when they heard last week that I was really going to be leaving, I had to walk through to fix something that was a problem in the kitchen. And I walked out and I didn't say anything to the kids because I was so focused on trying to figure out how am I going to tell this caterer that they have to get half the food they brought in out of the building immediately. And I didn't say anything to the kids. And all of a sudden, a teacher brings a second grade girl up to me and he says, "Rabbi, this young lady would like to talk to you." So I looked at her and she was one of the kids whose name I happen to know. And she said, "Are you really leaving, Rabbi?" I said, "Well, yeah, but I'm not going to leave until your next rabbi will be here. So there will always be a rabbi who will be very concerned about you and love you and all the children in the religious school." And as I walked out, there was a cheer that was started by the 7th graders. "We love you, Rabbi Ezring." All right. I am constantly stopped after services by people who are regulars, and they're concerned, where are you going to go next? And I get to tell them, I don't know. I haven't started applying yet. And that was true until last week. I think it was last week. And now I'm here for an interview. But I know my congregations. It's hard to get to know everyone by name, but I know the faces. If someone's sick or in the hospital, at the very least, they will get a call from me. I try to go to visit everyone who is hospitalized because that's a crisis in their lives. I try to make an appearance at every house of Shiva, whether it's to lead a Shiva minyan or to go during the day when we have a chance to talk. I try to talk to everyone who has something good to celebrate, a special anniversary, a special birthday, a new birth. And that's how I get to know the congregation. So I do my best to know the people, because for the next year, possibly two, God forbid, that's God forbid on your behalf, not mine. If I come here, I will be the rabbi of this congregation. And as such, I cannot abdicate that role to someone else.
Thank
Rhea, are you trying to say something?
No.
Okay, Lori?
Hi.
Hi,
Hi, Rabbi. Nice to meet you.
pleasure.
So we have a daughter who's being bat mitzvahed in the fall, and that kind of is a good segue what we were just talking about. I'm assuming you're going to be the one to have that experience with her. Are you going to be spending time leading up to that, getting to know the kids who are on the road to becoming bar and bat mitzvah?
My personal history, I spend approximately 6 hours in half-hour sessions working with the kids on their Divrei Torah and answering whatever questions the parents have. I do request that one parent be in the room with me at all times when I'm with a child. And that's for some practical issues. And also because I found a long time ago that parents were asking their children after meeting with me, and what did the rabbi ask you to do for the next meeting? Nothing. So, you get that 100 times and you realize there's a problem. So from that point on, it's important for me for one of the parents to be with us. But yeah, I do. It's important to know the kids so that when I speak to them, what I say is based on what I know of them and trying to draw them closer to Torah and the community. Okay. Jerry?
Sorry to occupy that, but the synagogue that you were in is Maitland near Orlando. Was that Ohev Shalom?
Yes.
I have I have some relatives that belong to that synagogue. Barbara and Bert Chesnoff are my cousins. I don't know if you knew them or not.
Barbara and Bert. Yeah, I know them well.
Yeah, well, they're my, she's my, her grandfather and my grandmother were brother and sister. She was, my grandmother was among 5 sisters, and her grandfather was the only boy in the family. But anyway, I'll pay. But anyway, if you get back, tell them I said hello.
I will. And if you want to give them
Jerry
a call,
Kaladkin.
and Jerry, if you want to give them a call to see how they feel about me, please feel free to do so.
Okay, well, I'll do a reference call then. But I tell you what I'm seeing right now, Rabbi. Out of all fairness, I haven't seen they'll maybe considering other candidates, but I'm very impressed with you and getting to know you. And
Thank you.
ironically, the assistant rabbi, Rabbi Blatt, she went. I don't know if you know Rabbi Rachel Blatt, but she's down in Tampa now. And one of my cousins is on the board of her shul, and she knows a couple of my relatives there. But anyway, I'll give Barbara and Bert a call. And
Please, when I was asked for a list of references, I usually just tell people, call anyone in the congregation. Don't ask for my references, because if I give you references, I'm not going to tell you to call the people who don't like me. Get real references. Call people who I don't know are going to be called. You can call anyone on the executive committees and almost anyone on the board of trustees at either of the 2 synagogues I've served as interim. And
how's Ken Rushfar doing? I know that he was a cantor at our shul before he went.
We talk probably once every other month, and we email each other probably another 3 times a month just to keep in touch. Yeah, Elias was a good Bima partner in many ways, and he's a good guy.
Yes, he
You-
is.
Your synagogue lost a wonderful cantor.
Well, we
Ours
got a
gained
great one now
wonderful
too.
cantor.
We got a good cantor new. We unfortunately and a couple of his replacements after were very good too. So our synagogue really did well with
Good.
cantors after him.
I'm glad you did. Rhea?
How about Susie Brock?
Susie Bruck from Charlotte.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, Susie and hi.
Susie loves you.
Uh,
She said you were so wonderful for their congregation.
yeah, I spent a couple of days there.
Yeah, 25 years.
25 years, yeah. And they were 25 enjoyable years. So, well, next time you talk to Susie, say hi to for me, please. Yeah, I'm still in touch with many people from Charlotte. They just send me notes every so often. I do some things. If I still get their bulletin. When I became the rabbi emeritus, one of the things I asked for was a lifetime membership in the synagogue. So we can go to high holiday services there whenever we want, etc. But I get the bulletins. So many times when there's a death in the congregation, someone who I knew, I call their family. And they're shocked that I call because, Rabbi, you haven't been here in 3 years and you're still calling us? I said, only for the people I liked. And we just had a woman who died who's one of the nicest, kindest people you could meet until you have to work with her. Then you realize she's the boss. And I called her son to wish him my condolences. And he said, Rabbi, you've been gone for 3 years. Unfortunately, our new rabbi never got to know my mother in this time. He said, you know what she was like, don't you? I said, yes, she was wonderful. She was kind. She was gentle until you had to work with her. She said, yeah, she used to push my dad. She was about 5'2" and her husband was 6'2". So, but she would push him around figuratively and literally, and he'd do whatever she wanted. Because that's the strength of a good woman.
Hey,
Thank you. I'm sorry.
says anyway.
I just asked my wife. I am the king of my castle. And she makes all the decisions for me. Yeah. Anything else? Nothing? All right.
But we did visit Ohev Shalom. We had a family reunion. In fact, we're gonna have one this year. And it turned out it was a weekend. My wife had yahrzeit for her father. He had died a year before, so we went to Ohev Shalom. And by mistake, I forgot to take my yarmulke off, and I had to get gas for the car. And some guy asked me all these questions about Judaism.
Well, welcome to Central Florida.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot to take my yarmulke off.
Yeah, most people won't say nasty things to you, but they will ask questions. Because although there are so many Jews in the area, the last number was tens of thousands. No one knows about Judaism, it seems.
Hey, Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes.
So I've been tasked to help with membership engagement, and we're doing a couple things here that we do annually on an annual basis anyway. But we're really looking to continue to engage our members in a I guess a hybrid world, right? Some in person and some over Zoom like this. We're looking to get volunteerism, really ramped back up. And we're really looking to get children to be excited and to be involved in the synagogue from a Hebrew school standpoint, but even more so. So, what type of things have you done in the past to really engage, to get volunteerism up, to engage every generation?
I have a perspective on synagogue life, and that is that there are three pillars on which a congregation stands: on its clergy, on its board of trustees, its lay leadership, and on its administrative leadership. And if we don't all work as partners, then we're not going to progress. So one of the things I like to do, Jason, is I like to meet with small groups, 10, 15, 20 couples in people's homes and talk to them about what they want. What do they enjoy about the synagogue, and what do they feel they need from the synagogue that they're not getting? And usually I will, in these meetings, turn the question around and say, I will help you get that done if you will help me get it done. And get a small group of people. What I've learned is long-standing standing committees are not enticing to younger people today. We stand a better chance of increasing volunteerism if we can get people to volunteer to work on a single project, one-time project with a clear beginning and a clear end. And tell them, if you'll work on this, you won't hear from us again to volunteer for a year. And it worked in Norfolk, and it started to work in Orlando, but the committee chairs felt a little threatened that they would lose their positions if we stopped relying on standing committees. So, but project-based, getting to talk to people in their own comfort zones. So I don't know where you live, and I don't know this community. So even if you told me where you lived, it wouldn't matter to me at this moment in time, because I don't know where that is. But if we were to turn to you and say, we'd like to get a small group of people of your peers together in your home or someone else's home in your neighborhood, would you be able to or willing to arrange for that? And contact people in different age groups in each of the major neighborhoods that the congregation lives in, and talk to them, see what they want, and then I will volunteer to help whatever they want to come to be, if they will. And it's amazing how well that works. So if you're looking to increase engagement, it's one-on-one or small groups on one or two that are we have to engage in active listening. Synagogue leaderships have a tendency to listen to what people want and then do what the board was going to do anyway without listening. That has to change. That's what relational Judaism is all about. It's building relationships. If you can build relationships, I don't know what business you're in, Jason, but I remember the first time one of the bankers in my congregation in Charlotte asked me out to lunch. He said, Rabbi, you're very good at what we're being taught in the bank right now. I said, oh, really? I'm not a financier. I don't understand money. What are you talking about? He said, well, they're teaching us that if you can make 5 contacts with a person, if your bank can have 5 different contacts with a person, they will probably bank with you. And in some business, it's 5 or 7. I happen to believe in synagogue life. If people meet 7 different people in a synagogue, they will eventually become members, and they will start coming to programs. But they have to be touched by not just the rabbi, not just the cantor, not just Jason, but by 6, 7 different people who make it clear that, wow, I didn't know you. It's wonderful having you here this Shabbat or this Friday night, Erev Shabbat, and get to know them. So, I mean, I think that truly understanding relational Judaism will help the congregation engage better with a wider range of people. Generally, it's better to have a 40-something meet with a group of 40-somethings, a 30-something to meet with 30-somethings, to get people to begin to build interest. And along with the rabbi, of course, because everyone wants to know who the rabbi is. Yeah. I've had more people fall in love with me and more people hate me after first meeting me than I ever imagined. I was a nice guy before I became a rabbi. Then I became a rabbi, and all of a sudden people didn't like some of the things I did. It was, wow. Yeah, I wasn't used to that at all. But by the way, the good thing about having an interim rabbi is if the leadership has decided there are changes that have to be made, and they're afraid some people won't like the changes, if you let me make them, people will hate me and not the synagogue. And when they say I should be fired, I get to tell them I already am. I have a 1-year contract. I'm one and done. And it takes the pressure off of the relationship that congregants have with others in the congregation who are going to be staying. So.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, it is, what is that? We've still got 10 minutes.
Rabbi.
Don't ask me what baseball team I like.
Well, I tell you something, being an Oriole fan for about over 55 years or whatever it is, we had our good times, but I tell you, it's tough, but I still stick with them Birds.
I'm a Yankee fan, and
That's all right.
It hasn't been so good in the last few years, but there was a rabbi in Olney named Rabbi Ari Sunshine, who was my former assistant rabbi. And whenever the Orioles and the Yankees played, we had a standing wager that if the Yankees won, he would buy me dinner. And if the Orioles won, I would buy him dinner. And sometimes if it was a big game or it meant progressing into the league championships or to the World Series, the winner would have to travel to the other city to take, the loser would have to travel to the other city to take the winner out. And I always lost out because he always had fleishik restaurants around that I would have to take him to. All I could eat at are pizza places and things like that. It's so.
You know what? I'm surprised you said you're from Illinois. Why didn't you become a Cardinals, Cubs, or White Sox fan?
Well, don't think I am not a Cubs fan. You can't be an Illinoisian and not love the Cubs, the Blackhawks, and the Bears. But Leon Hess was a member of my first congregation in New Jersey. So how could I not love the Jets? He owned them. And he was very generous. We had standing seats whenever we wanted them, the first or second row of the first mezzanine between the 48-yard lines. And the best seats I've ever had at a football game. And it was wonderful, just wonderful. I had never been to Yankee Stadium until 3 or 4 years ago when my son-in-law, who is an MLS strength and conditioning coach, his team was playing the New York Yankees. So he got us, I'm sorry, they were playing New York FC in Yankee Stadium, in the new stadium. And he got us tickets, and we were on the field of the new Yankee Stadium before the game played. I took pictures of all the signs and the big television screens, and it was just, and I have pictures of me standing on the field. I sent them to friends of mine, and I said, closest to heaven you can get, on the field at Yankee Stadium without a game being played. So.
I remember the first time I was in Yankee Stadium, it was the first year it opened. The old stadium was still up, and I went down to Monument Park. And I tell you, it was quite, I tell you, they're not shy about their history or about their tradition when you go to Yankee Stadium.
No, it is. And I have to tell you, it was fabulous for me to walk around and see the old greats. I will tell you, everyone in Orange County, Florida, who comes to Minion or one of my classes that I Zoom from home, behind me, directly behind me, is a picture of Yogi Berra and with, I think it's 80 yogiisms. But on the bottom is a first day cover of the last postage to go out of the old Yankee Stadium post office with the date mark and everything. And that's a treasure to me. And then you can see a picture of Babe Ruth being handed the Sultan of Swat big oversized baseball bat in 1929, and a picture of him and Lou Gehrig from 27 standing in the dugout. These are tintypes, so they're brown.
If you do come here, you got to go to the Babe Ruth house. You know, he's from Baltimore originally.
I did not know that, but thank you for
His
telling
father
me.
had a tavern that's on second base on Camden Yard, I understand. But his father had a tavern, but he was from Baltimore, and he lost his mother and he got sent to a school, to a kind of like a reformed, and that's when it was St. Mary's, and it was called. It's where I know where it is, because I've been over there a few times, but that's where someone saw his baseball skills, and that's when he started to develop them. It was here, but he's a native Baltimorean.
Wow. See, and the Red Sox.
You got to come to the Babe Ruth house. I'll tell you what. Let's have. If you get high, should you get hired, maybe you and I can go. I'll take you over there.
Oh, now that's an offer I couldn't refuse.
I'll have to check the hours, but I think you'd really like that.
Oh, okay. Well, I was told it's near the B&O Railroad Museum.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, very good. So that's another enticement. I like trains, and my grandchildren like trains.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting museum if you like trains.
Oh yeah,
You get on them, yeah.
Yeah, we have visited train museums everywhere they have lived.
Well,
Yeah.
you'll have this one to visit, but some of these neighborhoods you got to be careful in. But they got their own parking lot at the. They got their own parking lot. So anyway, perhaps get over to the B&O Train Museum.
Yeah, look, Baltimore is a wonderful city. There are a lot of very enticing things about the city.
I tell you, it's unfortunate because all we are is a depository of bad news, but I try to accentuate the positive that we got here. And I think it's even hearing from native Baltimoreans who live here, it seems like they're too negative about the city. I think I'm not a native Baltimorean, but I'm originally from a town, Knoxville, Tennessee.
Oh, wow. Very good.
Our family was from Tennessee, Georgia, Tennessee, from either Atlanta, Chattanooga, or Knoxville.
So did you belong to the conservative synagogue there?
Where, in Knoxville?
Yeah.
Well, I left when I was 5 years old, but I got back into the show a lot because I went with my grandparents. I went with my grandparents sometime, and they got to know me a little bit when my grandparents died, because I went to services afterwards and everything. So they got to really they kind of got to know me a little bit, very little.
That's a very strong, great, small Jewish community.
How do you know? Has the community know the synagogue?
Yeah, I had applied there when I was first ordained. And I'm going to tell you a secret that I did not know. No one would ever explain to me why I didn't get the job when they had told me they were going to hire me.
Oh, geez.
And I'm going to tell you what happened. And I'm going to say it softly so my wife can't hear me. We found out 15 or 20 years later that the reason they didn't hire me was because my wife wore a talit at services on Shabbat, and they weren't ready for that kind of women's liberation in the Jewish community.
1978.
1978. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, they did change that, because I went to a bas mitzvah there, and both a bas mitzvah and actually at the same time, since her mother didn't get bas mitzvah, she got bas mitzvah with her, and I remember they were wearing a talis.
Well, things change.
Yeah, they do. It's kind of, but anyway, we kind of rode by the show. They got cameras outside for security, but I guess that's the way the day is now.
Yeah,
But anyway, but I always wanted to go in there because my grandparents are on the memorial plaque, and in fact, they're on the memorial plaque at Beth Israel as well. But anyway, that's sort of my little story. So I'm a Southern boy originally. I came to Baltimore in 1959. So and next year I'll be 70 years old. So I
Well, if
just
I'm
turned
not
69.
mistaken, Baltimore has always been a southern city.
But some of us don't like to believe it.
Well, you know what? To
That-
maybe to Northerners, it's a southern. To Northerners, it's probably a southern city. To Southerners, it's a northern city.
Yeah, so we are coming up on 10 o'clock. Want to thank everybody who joined us this morning. If somebody has a really fast, short question, we have time for one more, but then we're going to have to conclude the Zoom. And thank you to Rabbi Ezring for sharing his time as well. And any last quick question?
I want to say thank you, Rabbi Ezring, for your time. I'm really glad we got to know you. And on behalf of everyone, I want to say thank you for your time and interest.
And thank you to all of you for coming this morning, and those of you who have been popping in and out of sessions that I've been part of. It's been a pleasure getting to know the congregation, and the congregants themselves and the leadership. And you never know, I might get lucky and get the chance to see you again.
Take care, Rabbi. Thank you again.
Thank you so
Be
much.
well, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
So long.
Thank you.